Started to it. So, welcome to the Magic the Gathering, the MTG deck delve, where I go over basically some of my Magic the Gathering decks. I explain my reasoning behind Build It, where it originated from. Hi, Damien. Streamcat will join us, at least for a little bit. What the cards do, why the cards are in this, some of the mechanics, some of the combos, and various things I combined together to make a, well, successful deck. And today with you, I have another block deck. I introduced a block deck previously with my Origins deck, but this is one of my favorites, which I'm calling the Infection of Phyrexia. It's a Scars of Mirrodin deck, which, once I start going over it, those of you that are familiar with Scars of Mirrodin will understand its namesake, but otherwise, you'll get a chance to learn a little bit more about it as I go on. Alright, so, a little bit of origin on this. It originated from the pre-release deck I created for Scars of Mirrodin. Scars of Mirrodin was the first pre-release I'd been to since Apocalypse. Granted, I don't go to many pre-releases since for a little while now, but basically when it was my marking of truly getting back into Magic. And I made a deck that was black-green. And so that's what this is, a black-green Phyrexian deck. And now, granted, it has certain aspects of Phyrexia in it only in this one, which I will eventually show off other Scars block decks that use other aspects of Phyrexians, but this is one that's definitely a little more controversial, but could be found in Modern. So we are a pure Modern deck as usual. So why don't we dive right into what the deck has to offer so we can get an idea of everything that's in there. Let's start with the first card, which I will tell you how many of each of these cards it is, because this is a 62 card deck. That's the important thing. It's 62 cards. And it does have only 25 different cards in it. That includes, you know, a playset of basic lands, a playset of forests, a playset of swamps. So the first card we have here is Go for the Throat. Destroy target non-artifact creature. It's pretty simple. It's a slightly better than something like Terror, which is non-black, non-artifact. So already we are advancing it. I have two of these in the deck. These are creature removal. Now granted, again, it doesn't stop artifact creatures, which is a little bit of a weakness in that case, but unless you're specifically playing an artifact deck, normally you don't have to necessarily worry about this. And normally even artifact decks have creatures that are supporting it that are non-artifact creatures. This is a way of targeting them and eliminating them. Go for the Throat is good creature elimination. Now we're going to start getting into the essence of what this deck is. Just a little bit of it. Hand of the Praetors. 3/2 Infect. So those of you, now you will know what truly this deck is. It's an Infect deck. That's the easiest way to say it. Infect is this creature deals damage in the form of -1/-1 counters. It deals damage to an opponent in the form of poison counters. If an opponent gets 10 poison counters, they die. It doesn't matter how much life they had. So that's the advantage of this deck. It shuts down life gain and makes it that 10 damage is all your opponent can have sneak through. Granted, it also then shrinks your opponent's creatures. I have a playset of Hand of the Praetors, because if you're doing an Infect deck, having 4 of them is a necessity. So it gives other creatures you control with Infect +1/+1. It boosts all your other Infect creatures. Whenever you cast a spell with Infect, target player gets a poison counter. The reasoning behind this is advancing poison counters is always good, and since the majority of things I will be casting from this deck have Infect, I can start throwing out poison counters on my opponents very quickly and efficiently, and this would work both in single player and multiplayer. So, Hand of the Praetors is a critical aspect of this deck. Reaper of Sheldred. It's another Infect, a 2/5 Infect. So it's a little more defensive, but when a source would deal damage to it, the source's controller gets a poison counter. That's the advantage of it. Now you might want to attack me to defeat me, but if you do, well, I have a Reaper out. I can have you get a poison counter. I've got 2 Reapers of Sheldred. So the thing about this is multiple kind of blocking. It's anything. So blocking the Reaper is also terrible, because you might not get 2 poison counters, instead you get 1 still, because you're blocking and dealing damage to it. And you don't want to block with multiple creatures, so you just want one big creature to try to take out Sheldred, the Reaper of Sheldred. If you block with multiple creatures, that's multiple sources of damage to the same creature, each one getting you a poison counter. You can see how terrible this ends up being. Reaper of Sheldred forces a lot of terrible decisions on your opponent's side, and that's the reasoning behind having 2 in this deck. Now, Sheldred, the Whispered One. I had a whole bunch of Sheldred. For some reason, when I got New Phyrexian, I think I got 2 boxes, I got like 3 copies of Sheldred. Yeah. So 1 ended up here. Because after I... Remember what I do. I do my pre-made, my constructed decks, the ones I plan out first. After I put the copies of Sheldred I wanted in those, I still had 1 left. So the next place they go to are block decks. Then everything else. So she got in here. 6/6 Swamp Walk. This is endgame stuff. At the beginning of upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can keep up your infect creatures. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, they sacrifice a creature. By the time you get Sheldred out, it is a 7 mana drop, so it is expensive. But as you will see, I have mana ramp in here that will help to get Sheldred out if you should have her in an early hand. But she just devastates, because now I can throw out certain infect creatures without want, because if one dies, I'll get one back at the next turn, and my opponents start losing creatures. So Sheldred is very good. Beast Within. Here's my answer to the artifact creature problems. Destroy target permanent, its controller gets a 3/3 beast creature token. I don't care about my opponent's creatures, because I have ways of just eating them up with infect, which does damage in the form of -1/-1 counters. Giving them something for destroying something, whether it's a creature, a land, an artifact, enchantment, a planeswalker. Beast Within eliminates a card I don't want on the board and replaces it with a creature I can deal with, because this deck deals with creatures. I have 2 Beasts Within here. So you can see now we've already set up that we are forcing lots of bad decisions on my opponents. We are slowly but surely infecting them away into nothing. And we are devastating their creatures while controlling their other things. Now, here's a good trick one. Bellowing Tangleworm. Now you'd say, but wait, we've only seen black creatures up to now. Bellowing Tangleworm isn't that good. Oh, ye of little faith. You will see the depths of how good my green is in this one. It's Intimidate, meaning you cannot block it unless you have a green or an artifact creature. And other green creatures you control have Intimidate. Can't be blocked by except artifact or creature. Creature that shares a color with it. That's the important part. So I do have 1 green-black creature in here that you will see that all your green creatures need to be blocked by green or artifact creatures. It can make a bunch of things unblockable, and that's why Bellowing Tangleworm is in here. I only have 1 copy of Bellowing Tangleworm in here, so it is more of a win condition card. Blight Mamba. Pretty simple here. 1/1 infect, it regenerates. That's why it's in here. I've got 2 of them. A regenerator that has infect means I can use it as a infect blocker, or I can send it out once every turn without worrying about it dying because I could pay for its regeneration costs, just to ping away at my opponent's stuff, to get rid of a small 1/1, to kill off something else, to weaken something. It just eats up stuff slowly but surely, and I can keep sending them out. That's the reasoning behind them. Also, you know, they might not be blockable, depending on the circumstance. Blight Widow. Now, this one's important because flying is something we haven't seen a lot of in this deck, so reach. 2 Blight Widows to go with my 2 Blight Mambas means that this 2/4 can eat up some flying creatures, and it's a reach infect. Pretty simple there. It just eats up flying creatures that help defend against them. You know, basics. She's an important one, an interesting one. Melora Sylvok Outcast. You can't get poison counters. Creatures you control with a -1 can't have -1/-1 counters plants on them. Creatures your opponents control lose infect. This is my answer to other infect decks, which might exist out there. Melora stops them. It shuts them down. I'm the only one infect. My creatures can't shrink from things. It also shuts down other -1/-1 counter actions, which could be done depending on the circumstances. So you could definitely get decks that this will damage and shut down and set up for you to get the win. Also, if someone should steal some of your creatures, guess what? They lose this stuff. You do have to worry about Melora getting stolen, though. That's the only thing about that. So there is some weakness to her to a degree, but she does have her uses depending on the deck you're fighting. That's what you want a little bit of. Ready for it. Only 1 of her. Now here's a play set. Phyrexian Swarmlord. 4/4 infect. At the beginning of your upkeep, putting 1/1 green insect creature token with infect on the battlefield for each poison counter your opponents have. That's the important thing. If I'm playing a 1 versus 1 game, this is good, but this isn't great. If I'm playing a multiplayer game where I'm spreading out my poison counters across 3 or 4 different players, the amount of infect insects I keep getting get bigger and bigger. And if I have a number of Hands of Praetor out, they're 2/2s, 3/3s, 4/4s, up to 5/5s, and I'm getting a swarm of them. Bellowing Tangleworm means you have to have green to block them. My swarm I'm creating. The Swarm Lord, along with the Hands of the Praetor, are the big combination of things that starts you getting an army of infect creatures that are green. And they are good to have in here. They make it mean. Now here's a trick. Spinebiter. 3/4 infect that only signs combat damage as though it wasn't blocked. Here's the important thing about that. As it wasn't blocked. Meaning I could throw it out to attack there. When it's dealing combat damage, it just does straight 3 poison counters to my opponent. I might lose the Spinebiter. I might. But there's nothing they can do to stop it. I may have it just deal its damage to an opponent. A number of Hands of the Praetor, other ways of boosting up how big this thing is. I could possibly get it up to a 10 something rather, sneak it through, smack my opponent, kill them in one swoop. Spinebiter. That's the trick of it. That's the mean part of it. 2 Spinebiters in here. Tangle Angler. A 1/5 infect. For a green mana, target creature blocks this turn, Tangle Angler this turn if able. I can force things that I want to have infected, block the Tangle Angler. I can lure things in. I could also, with enough mana, eliminate a number of my opponent's blockers, allowing me to sweep in with other creatures into my opponents and, well, infect them to death. I only have to deal 10 damage over the course of a game. That you have to remember that. So having something that I can open up my opponents to an attack, 2 of them, is a critical thing that will devastate them very easily. The trick of it is just to get those tokens in. Triumph of the Hordes. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1, trample, and infect. Now, granted, I already have infect for most of my creatures. Not all of them, so a few of them will get infect from Triumph of the Hordes. The +1/+1 is definitely good. The big thing here is trample. This means my creatures now all trample, meaning I only need to get 10 damage through. Period. With those poison counters. So 2 Triumphs of the Horde, just to make sure I can get one. And, well, devastate my opponents. Very quickly, very efficiently. Very stream kitty. Let's move on. Now, I actually have the promo version of Galissa the Trader. See? She's got some different art to her. She's not on the, like, snake with the armor that makes it look like she's kind of snake. You get up there, Damien. She's a first strike death touch. That's a 3/3. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is put to a graveyard from battlefield, you return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, but you'll see that I've got a number of powerful artifact cards which are very useful to have. That having my opponent's cards die gets me stuff back. I get stuff out of that. And so I do want my opponent's creatures to die, so that I get artifacts back, which I can use then. And she's a first strike death touch, so she's pretty good that way. She's a mean one. Argentum Armor. A big expensive thing, but very useful. An equipped creature gets +6/+6. How about that Spinebiter? I can give it +6/+6. There's a 9/10. Bam. I now only have to get +1/+0. Or, hey, a Hand of the Praetor's out. Now it's a 10/11. I attack once, kill someone. Anyway, when a equipped creature attacks, destroy target permanent. It's a very simple thing, but it's a very deadly thing. Now, it's expensive to use, and as you'll see, again, I haven't shown you any, but I do have some mana ramp in here, which will help out a lot. But regardless, even without the mana ramp, it's a big removal kind of thing. I can get rid of a permanent I don't want. Batterskull. It's a living weapon. Living weapon's cool, not helpful. It creates a 0/0 black germ token that is attached to this thing when you put it into play. Equipped creature gets +4/+4 and has vigilance and lifelink. Vigilance is good. I don't have to tap it to attack. Can leave defenses. Lifelink, protecting myself. Remember, I've shut down my opponent's poison counters in effect. I don't have to worry about them. I have to worry about damage to myself. So a little bit of lifelink goes a long way. 3, return it to your owner's hand. So I can bring it back, this thing, to get it out again as a creature if I wanted to. I can get more living weapons pretty easily. More germ tokens if I really needed to. The entire thing about the Batterskull is it's there to give you life, to give you the vigilance. And the +4/+4 for an equip of 5 is not bad with all that put together. Now we're going to talk about artifacts that will go away and come back. Horizon Spellbomb. So this is the first of them. For 2 mana, tap it, search your library for a basic land, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Shuffle your library. Pretty simple. I get rid of Horizon Spellbomb, I get a land. But if it's put to your graveyard from the battlefield, I may pay green if I do draw a card. So, now granted, I might have to wait more than my first turn to play. I play this on my first turn. I might not want to use this my second turn. I might want to wait to my third turn to use this, because then I get a land. I get a card then, too. That sets me up for my next turn very well. I get 2 cards out of it. And because I have things like Glissa, I can bring this back and use it over and over again to get more lands. It's mana ramp. I have 2 spell bombs in here to mana ramp it. Now here's my other ramp up. Infiltration lands. Whenever a creature becomes blocked by a creature, whenever an equipped creature becomes blocked by a creature, you may draw 2 cards. Equip 1. This is why this is powerful. This is why this is gross. Think of it this way. I equip this onto Blight Mamba. Blight Mamba, maybe it does 1 damage to my opponent. They get a poison counter. But you have to remember, that opponent's thinking, I can only get 10 poison counters. What happens after I get that? I don't really like that. I'll block Blight Mamba. Or I'll block that infect creature. I'll block this infect creature. And guess what I get then? 2 cards. 2 cards every time, and I can keep throwing infiltration ones. I could throw it onto little insect tokens that my Swarm Lord creates. I can just force you to block effectively because you don't want infect creatures getting through. And I just get cards and play more stuff and ramp up quicker. 2 infiltration lenses in here. Blegmir. It taps for a colorless mana. Pretty simple. That's a little bit of acceleration on mana ramp. It's a 1/1 infect. Pretty decent little thing there that accelerates my mana production pretty good. I've got a play set of them. They are the mana ramp which went best in here, I felt like. Granted, it's not colored. It's colorless mana ramp. But with my land distribution, I can assume I can get at least a green and a black. And for most things, I only need a single green or a single black. In fact, I think the only things I need 2 for are Sheldred, the Tangleworm, the Swarm Lords, the Spinebiter, Triumphant Hordes, and Glissa. And most of those are 2 green. All the others, I only need 2 black for one thing, Sheldred. So as long as I get 1 Swamp and 2 Forests, I'm set for the game. Then I can just have things like Plague Mirrors here to ramp up my mana very decently. So, play set of Plague Mirrors, that's my other big mana ramp that I have in here. Steel Helicite. It's a 2/2 flyer that for 2 mana, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Alright, that's great. That's not super terrific. That's a little decent. Where Steel Helicite becomes powerful is where its X ability comes up. Destroy each non-land permanent with a converted mana cost of X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Helicite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. Now, you have to think about what this actually means. I deal damage to someone with Steel Helicite. Okay, they might let Steel Helicite through because it's not infect. That might trick them up and think, oh, I don't need to block this. I can then just play X. And that X can be any number. Think about this. If my opponent is creating a token deck, and maybe they don't have enough flying tokens to block Steel Helicite here, they can't block it, I do something to give it trample or something, I pay X as 0. I can only do this once each turn, but I can destroy every token because each of them has a converted mana cost of 0. Or if they have a whole bunch of things that had converted mana cost of 2, I just pay 2 mana, destroy all of them. And this is that opponent in particular. I am destroying non-land permanents with a converted mana cost of X, and the controller has to have been dealt combat damage by Steel Helicite. That's the important thing here, is I have to have hit them with Steel Helicite to activate this. So if I didn't hit them with Steel Helicite, then forget it. It's not happening. Sword of Body and Mind. Yeah, I threw one of these in here. I got one in the set. I got two of these, in fact. I, in fact, got two Swords of Body and Mind when I got the original Scars of Mirrodin block. A quick creature has +2/+2 protection from green and blue. Those are not important. When it deals combat damage to a player, put a 2/2 green wolf token into play. Okay, cool. And that player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library in his or her graveyard. This is more incentive to block something. I throw Infiltration Lens and Sword of Body and Mind on some crap creature. They want to block it. They don't want to lose 10 cards. They don't want to get poison counters, which they would get at least 3 of. They don't want to have me grade a wolf token, but instead, I get 2 cards. It's more incentive, but it's also a decent equipment to just boost up someone and make them more powerful. That's the point of it. Make something more powerful. Sword of War and Peace. Equip creature +2/+2 and protection from red and white. Alright. When a quick creature deals combat damage to a player, Sword of Peace and Mind deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in his or her hand, and you gain 1 life for each damage dealt this way. So this is actually another way of killing someone. So, you know, I deal damage to someone with something small, with a wolf token, with something that they don't care as much to block. I can deal them damage equal to the number of cards in hand and gain some life. Its effect is also protection from red and white can be very good. I could throw it in something if I'm facing against a red or a white deck. I now have 4 protections of colors. I can't protect against black, as you've seen, but the other 4 colors, I have artifacts to protect against those colors. And that really means is you can't handle whatever I'm putting this on anymore. I can protect a Swarmlord. I can protect Seldrit. I can protect Malura. I can protect one thing that I want from your effects as much as I want. Shut it down. That's why the 2 swords are in here. I had them, and I didn't really have a deck I really wanted them in, so I felt this one. This is our card number 41, in fact, because there are 41 normal cards in this deck. Look at that. We have, in fact, gone through this, and this is actually one of my smaller, well-made decks, I think. This is a deck that I've designed very well. But we want to handle the lands now, because we do have 21 lands that we want to talk about. First off is I only have 1 of these. I used to have more, but I kind of traded/sold them off. Inkmoth Nessus. Tap for a colorless. For 1, it becomes a 1/1 artifact creature with flying and infect until end of turn. That's still a land. Effectively, I can make a land of mine an infect creature if I really needed one. If I need an extra infect creature, this is really great. I could just throw something out there and be like, oh, I need an extra 1/1 just to make sure I murder this guy with infect tokens. Inkmoth Nexus. Other than that, it taps for land. And then, of course, we have 10 swamps, count them 10, and 10 forests, count them 10. Bam. Swamp, forest. Granted, I have an interesting selection of where these lands came from originally. You know, just sort of threw about what I had. A bunch of the dual Planeswalker decks that they did, the little M symbol, some M10s, some archenemy stuff, you know, a lot of different places that these lands came from originally. That is this deck. I, in fact, have very little to no Scars/anything else deck. I have 1 Scars Swamp, not the one shown, may I note. And I think I only have, oh, no, I have 3, count them, 3 Scars Forests. Including 1 copy of the one shown. Woo! So, yep. So I only have 21 lands, 41 cards, a 62 card deck. This is a very powerful, pure Scars Infect deck. Granted, I'm pretty sure if I wanted to make this more of a modern deck, I could cut certain things out and put other things in that would be more advantageous to the nature of it. But for a pure block deck, and a pretty decent modern deck, this deck is one that I don't play with a lot because it is very deadly and very aggressive. It's made just to destroy opponents quickly and efficiently, to shut them down, to devour them as I will, to infect them. It's got ways of making you you have to make powerful decisions between the creatures that you're trying to build your basis with and protecting yourself from infection. Because there's always that inking thing in your head. I can only take 10 poison counters. I can only take 10 poison counters. What am I going to do to stop these 10 poison counters? And that's why this deck is as good as it is, as potent as it is. And it is one of my... Out of all the block decks I've made a lot of ones that I really do love. This is still one of my favorites, I have to say. Even though I don't play it a lot because you're being a dick when you're playing an infect deck. I'm not going to deny that. I made one. I made 4 Scars decks, though, and only one of them is a direct infect deck. Not to say that there isn't some infection and stuff like that other decks, but only one of them is direct infect deck, and that's this one here. But I did, again. I made 4 Scars decks. So, if I want to play a Scars of Mirrodin deck, I have options to do anyway. But it is fun when you want to do it. When you just want to be deadly aggressive and have a good time with that kind of attitude, infect deck's for you. I do have to say. So, that's one I did want to talk about, and I'll probably put up a poll later on today for this Friday's MTG deck delve of what we want to do, whether it's going to be another design deck, a commander deck, or another block deck. Maybe I'll put up a couple of options for block decks up there, just to see who wants what, you know, who wants to see what. And we'll try to do that. But I'm going to head off then. I thank you for those of you joining me today. I hope you had a great time, enjoyed learning a little bit about this deck I built, a type of deck, a deck that is dedicated to a certain block of Magic cards that technically is modern, that, you know, you could use in any of these things. So I will definitely be back this Friday at 4 p.m. should be the timing for it. That's, I think, my normal time for deck delve. I'm trying to forget. And, yep, I'll put this up a little later on YouTube then this week.